It's my pleasure to be able to introduce our panel here and turn it over to them to give a little bit of a background. But what this session is all about is growing perennial markets. So growing markets for our crops. We're going to actually split it into a little bit. We got a two-part session here. So first session, we are going to be talking with some hazelnut market folks, as well as a little bit of a jack of all trades. And then we're going to hand it over to the berry folks to do a bit of a dynamic presentation that I'm looking forward to. So first, why don't we just go down the line, introduce yourselves, a little bit of background, 2 or 3 minutes each, and then we'll dive into questions. And audience, please get questions ready. We're going to go to the audience for any questions that you might have related to marketing, market development, selling, what have you.
Okay. Maybe I'll take this side. So I'm Pam Saunders, and I acquired a partner a few years ago who had planted hazelnuts, just like a lot of people did, like about 10, 12 years ago. And so the property has 200 plants, which is a hobby scale. And I asked this partner what his plan was for these hazelnuts, and he said, I don't know. And I'm a farmer, so that didn't stand. I learned about American Hazelnut Company, which was started in 2014 by some of those same people who had also planted a lot of hazelnuts on their property, what we now call seedlings with kind of variable genetics. And so the founders of this company thought that the genetic improvement was going to come along faster than it did. And so that was the downside of having been an early incorporation of this grower LLC. The upside was that it's given us time to sort of develop our business and get our feet on the ground about developing products, figuring out how to drive out some of the costs of further processing, doing some marketing, establishing our brand and tightening up our structure and our policies and so forth. So we see our place in the supply chain as being an aggregator. We are, thank you. We're a grower-owned LLC. We have about 35 members of the LLC in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois. About 20 of them are active growers. Some folks have actually aged out over time, over those 10 years, and some people have young plantings that are not yet producing. And we also have space for investor members who are not planning to grow but are interested in the development of this industry.
And that's American Hazelnut Company.
Oh, did I forget to say that?
I don't know if you did. I just wanted to make sure that people knew. Okay. And what's your role again with American Hazelnut Company?
I'm on the board. I'm a grower. My background, I spent 20 years with Organic Valley. So that's a farmer co-op. I was in operations and quality and started there actually, with the producers. So brought that set of skills to the job. So now I'm actually doing work in the kitchen, as well as what would be considered board work, the normal stuff that a secretary of a board does, like taking minutes and keeping track of membership and that kind of thing. So we see our place in the supply chain as being from aggregation to bringing the products to market. But we're very interested in supporting all the research and all the things that have to happen before aggregating nuts from our membership. And there's a lot in that list. Producers want to know what's going to happen if they plant hazelnuts. And it's our job to establish that there is, in fact, demand. And we've done that. We have the last 3 years, we've been able to sell all the hazelnuts and just squeak by until the next harvest, which is the sweet spot. So we are trying to make plans for the coming years, and that's our role. And here is a colleague. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Paul Ronsheim. I'm a retired material scientist. It has nothing to do with perennial farms. But I planted some hazelnuts and I thought I was a grower. Well, it turns out to be a grower, you have to have a market, you have to have sales, and you have to have product development. So I started off with hazelnuts, but quickly found myself with American Hazelnut Company working on product development, production, and marketing. So that's
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Ariel, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Ariel Pressman. I was a longtime certified organic vegetable grower. I spent many years working with a nonprofit farmer-run certification called Real Organic Project, where we got to visit with farmers across the country and do a community-based organic certification. And right now I have the pleasure of working with Renewing the Countryside, the Midwest Elderberry Cooperative, and the Savannah Institute on a lot of these very sticky supply chain issues, especially around elderberries, of how do we get farmers set up for success? How do we get ingredients formatted in a way, as in turned into things like juices and powders that larger buyers might be interested in? And how do we make sure that throughout that whole process, the growers are represented and taken care of? And we end up with a price that actually works for the growers and incentivizes people wanting to put in additional acres and really being able to depend on this for their livelihood.
Awesome. So there's I guess a situation that each one of these crops has in some regard that we work with in our portfolio. They're relatively new. Wanted to see if you all at American Hazelnut Company could kind of explain the process that you've gone through of developing demand and a place to sell these nuts, and also answer the time, the age-old question of what comes first, chicken or egg?
That would be both. Yeah, did you want to talk?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so, the one of our goals is to have a brand identity so that we develop some loyalty to the brand. And in order to do that, we have to communicate the value of our product. And the value of our product that distinguishes it from, say, the nuts that are grown in Oregon is that they are Midwest grown, they're perennial, they are soil and water holders, they are carbon sequesters, and they're also delicious. That actually has to be number one. So we've worked on developing packaging that communicates that. We're kind of in our second iteration of packaging, and working with a local graphic artist. And, I think that the trick too is to have a diverse customer base. We do a lot of online sales. That provides kind of a lever for us to manage supply and demand. We don't open up more customers than we can serve. If you open up a customer and then you can't fill their needs, that's a real bummer. And so we've tried to limit that. We've also we do some ingredient sales, but again, you don't develop brand loyalty and you risk having that customer just go to a different source, whether it be Turkish hazelnuts or Oregon hazelnuts, and then you lose your points of differentiation. Dad, does that answer what you were?
Yeah. Yes, that was great. Ariel, I was wondering if you could maybe add some, based on your experience around this whole chicken and egg thing. Also maybe comment on price points, and as things begin to scale, as Pam was talking about, almost this stepwise, right, function that we have of increasing demand, fulfilling that demand just inch by inch. What are your thoughts around that? Because I know there's a lot of concerns, right, as we grow. Well, how are we going to make this stuff profitable in the long run if we're competing against commodities, if it's a race to the bottom in terms of price? Just add some color around that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's a great thing we need to keep in mind. I've often thought with any kind of agricultural product, there's a virtually unlimited market if you're willing to sell it below the cost of production, right? But there's a much smaller market if we actually need to make money. And we have to recognize that virtually nobody in this room probably became a farmer or got involved in this business for the money, but you still need to make money to stay in business. So one of the things I'm really focusing on is to start, we can find efficiencies. Those exist, those can reduce the costs, but only so far. So for example, I'm thinking on my farm, when we bought a big refrigerated truck, now you've got some efficiencies. I can fill up that truck. That is not all of a sudden going to make my tomatoes go from $3 a pound to 50 cents a pound. So we need to recognize how far can we push those efficiencies as far as what prices they get us. I think the other thing I'm really interested in, especially in this space, is as farms scale up to larger commercial scales, there's going to be appropriate equipment and infrastructure. And then we need to make sure the farms both have the knowledge and the financing to actually leverage that infrastructure. So I'm really excited with, Chris might mention this, MEC recently got a grant to get a really large 40-foot cargo container freezer, right? That's really exciting infrastructure. It'll be available for many different farmers in the area. But to pay for the electricity of that freezer, we got to make sure that thing's full, right? And that means also right-sizing the work we're doing so we don't have 2 pallets bigger than what goes in that freezer, because now we need to buy a second one, and that's going to be mostly empty. So I think to my mind, a lot of it is doing that sticky work of connecting the growers, understanding what people are growing, what the markets are asking for, and then making sure that we're maximizing it in a way that, again, creates profit for the growers. I'm very excited. Me and Chris are going to Supply Side West in a couple weeks here. And I think what we're going to find is there's probably, again, plenty of people that might want to buy elderberry powder at a low price point. It's our job then to figure out which buyers can support a price point that actually supports the livelihood of all the growers, and how do we communicate that value proposition in terms of creating the markets that actually create prosperity for the growers.
Awesome. Do you, American Hazelnut Company, do you guys want to comment related to the price point thing? And then we're going to take some questions from the audience. So be ready. Raise your hand. We got somebody to run around with a mic.
Yeah, we want to show a trend of upward pay price for the farmers. And I think that's how we engage more producers. And what that implies is that you have to be driving costs out in some other efficiencies. And, we've been able to do that with some improvements in our equipment. This is in the further processing side. And obviously the more it is a volume kind of a business, but that is the dynamic. As you drive costs out, you have to be able to return more to the producer and not race to the bottom.
Gotcha. Great. Any questions from the audience? If not, I'm going to keep asking questions here. Oh, we got one right here.
On that last comment, brag a little bit about AHC. So you're driving costs out, but also added value with your product line. I think that's important to try to find that margin for the customer of driving up the quality or the price point of your product, and you guys are doing that.
Yeah, and we're for example, right now it almost seems like a duh, but we are developing trail mixes now so that we can extend our supply, so that it will still be under our brand, but that we can maximize the margin that we can derive from our products and still have that Midwest grown identity. So yeah, that's another strategy for doing that. We could also, with the equipment that we've acquired, we could consider doing processing, fee for processing work with, we've got a decent oil press, we've got flour grinding capacity. We could do that. There are some other ways, some strategies for us to add.
And we've got another question up here, looks like. Got another, okay. I just want to follow up on that real quick related to brand, right? So you're bringing a product within your portfolio that is increasing but it's still, the reason why you're able to do it successfully, hopefully, is because you have a strong brand, right? Can you talk just briefly about how do you develop a strong brand so that you can go do something like that?
Well, I have an opinion about that. I don't see American Hazelnut Company as being a brand. It's the name of our company. I think we have work to do in establishing what our brand really is. And we're doing that. Even 10 years in, we're still figuring that out. A brand that will communicate who we are, where we are, and why you should be loyal to us. So it's a big project. I am not a marketer. Absolutely not. Fortunately, we have somebody who is a sales and marketing manager, and who is being taught, has a lot of great mentors. So that's, yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
When you started talking about, trying to drive prices out and I started wondering about the infrastructure building, and of course the investment that you need to build it. And I was just wondering, one, there probably isn't a whole lot of infrastructure, is there, for the hazelnut business here in Wisconsin? So did you have to get together and all invest in the infrastructure part? And are you still in that kind of, the role of just, owning things together, or can you piggyback at all? Anything? Because
Yeah.
getting the hazelnuts out of the shell, it's almost as bad as getting the milk out of the cow.
That is, so the shelling facility is in Ashland, Wisconsin, and it is a shared facility and has been a private-public partnership. Early in AHC, it was the investors and the founders whose money was supporting the development of the business. And now it's the government that's our investor. And the government doesn't require you to have a 5-year plan. They want you to say what you're going to do, and then they want you to tick the boxes. But the next step, for further development, I think really requires us to build on what we've done. But the infrastructure, it's not like Organic Valley that could go to dairy plants that existed. It's quite specialized, and that infrastructure is under development, and lots of partners, lots of people talking about it. But yeah, we have to invent the wheel in some ways. Talk about that. Okay.
Was kind of touched on before. I guess it seems from all three of y'all that there is always, the marketing and the branding is the hardest thing. It's finding customers for that, and you do not want to, out compete that. You don't want to let them down and then lose that customer loyalty. But it also seems like there might be a producer shortage as well. So I guess when it comes to having your shelling infrastructure that you have in Ashland, would you also maybe think about, and you have your oil press where you could, do some work for local producers? Would you think about, renting out harvesting equipment or other things like that to be able to make it easier so you have a better source and more of a consistent source of producers, so you could actually have maybe more of some kind of plan to increase that production so you can increase your customers? I know this is a big question. So you don't have to answer it in full, but as someone who is interested in, really wanting to do a large acreage to make sense for us, that's why I asked the question.
We really don't have a large infrastructure. I mean, there aren't other producers really other than us of any scale. Oregon makes some products, but not like we're doing with the snacks and the Midwest trademark in a way. But
the harvest.
Well, so when you get large enough, you need a harvester, and they're expensive. It's capital that most of us don't have. Often growers get together and share and pass it around, but it's difficult because it's big to transport, and you have to harvest several times during the season to capture the variety maturity rates.
You provide the oil press. You could eventually, if you said it's all government or you have government funding, you could rent that out to, farmers that produce for you. Is that ever been a thought on your mind, or is it just like, I don't want to deal with that hassle of dealing with transportation of a big piece of equipment? And we have plenty of people right now and not enough customers, or vice versa.
And I think that'll be difficult for us to implement, to manage.
No, I totally get that.
Both access to the equipment, and yeah, it's not going to be easy. In our shared kitchen space, we're in tight quarters. We have to coordinate with our neighbors when we do our grinding, things like that. So I think we want to stay in control of our equipment now and not lease it out.
I think part of what you're getting at is what is the vision for on-farm cooperation among growers? And there is a vision that has not, it's not been realized yet. But the idea is that there would be hubs of growers, that growers would establish themselves in reasonable proximity, so that these behemoths that are harvesters don't have to be transported long distances. So there are currently now Go First Farms, that's in quotes, that's the name of them. And they have the best genetics, Savannah Farms. Some of the Savannah farms are Go First Farms. And around those farms, the idea is that you would build hubs that have access to harvest equipment and also huskers, because husking is a big underappreciated piece of the puzzle. Yeah.
Yeah, and with hazelnuts in particular right now, one of the big bottlenecks in supply side right now isn't necessarily the lack of equipment, it's the lack of plant material of a certain genetic type that allows for adequate productive projection down the road. We have a lot of seedlings that we can have. We don't have a lot of cultivars. So we're working on that piece to be able to exponentially multiply the number of growers that we have to enable all this stuff a bit more. Questions? Yeah, we got one over here. Oh, over here. Great.
Hi, I have a question about how we can avoid commodity crop problems. So all of these crops that we're talking about putting it in, a lot of them are like 15 to 30 to 50 to 100-year commitments, depending on, what kind of tree or bush that you're planting. I have an apple farm, and in apple production, there's no shortage of people who will process. There's no shortage of people who will buy. But this year, it wasn't worth picking our apple trees because it's a commodity crop, and it's not worth picking them because we wouldn't make a profit selling them. And we're stuck with those varieties. So I guess I'm wondering, this keeps me up at night as someone who wants to plant sort of new crops that right now are specialty crops. But in the years to come, is there a way that early adopters could maybe help define a different market culture in this space so that we don't create this problem of commodification of a crop that, basically would make it not profitable and not friendly to all of these agroforestry and biodiversity things? Like, you don't have to cut corners to, cut out all of your people capital and things like that just to make ends meet as a person who owns a farm.
I am hopeful that we can, as an industry, continue to support both small and more commercial sized operations. I always go back to the Organic Valley example. Organic Valley started with organic as the way to distinguish itself from the commodity dairy commodity business, because dairy was oversupplied, and so organic was the way to manage that. We have a supply management policy in our company. We don't even think about it right now because we want every last nut that we can get. But there could come a time when we would have to think about that. And then, so what is our mechanism as a hazelnut industry? Is Midwest grown enough of an identity? Do we have to think about certified organic in order to, have that point of differentiation? And it's a important question. And it's, I guess each crop will figure that out. But it's the right question, I think.
Ariel, yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to put on my hat as a produce farmer, because what's interesting when I was doing vegetable farming is virtually everything is a known commodity, right? You've got carrots, you've got broccoli. So I think from the get-go, defining what makes our products different and then finding markets for those products that recognize the differentiation. So it's interesting when you mention apples. I was in California last year and I was learning that the apple growers that sell to Martinelli's, like the cider, it's only a specific type of apple that can make that cider. And so it's actually developed into its own niche market because Martinelli's needs to pay a premium to make those growers not rip out those apple trees to plant more commodity type apples. So I think when we can find the right markets we're working towards, and I think as we're developing some of these markets around elderberries, aronia berries, hazelnuts, if we can find the right customers that are going to recognize the differentiation and need the differentiation, then I think we can do better than just going back down to rock bottom kind of commodity pricing.
Just to respond to that, we had a situation where we were paid by a baby food company to put in a bunch of Stanley plums. I don't know if anyone else was paid by, but basically you have to be super careful if you're planting for one customer because they decided that they didn't want to do Stanley plums anymore. And we were stuck with this plum that's sort of like completely inedible almost. So just a word of
no, and I just want to say I completely agree. You're reminding me of I had a terrible thing on my farm where a customer told me to plant a large number of ghost chili peppers. We're in the upper Midwest. And then they just decided by the time they were done, they didn't want them anymore. It's like, what are you supposed to do with that? So I do think there's another piece here where as this market matures, to the point you brought up, we really need to focus on the idea of forward contracting. Right? The idea that a company could tell you to put in a crop and then not have to buy that crop is insane. And I recognize there's just reality we're dealing with here, but I think as we're evolving, we can pick or choose our customers a little more, and we can set the tenets of how these industries evolve. And so I think to my mind, having some of that forward contracting of saying, I would hope in the future being able to say, hey, we'll put in the plum trees. In return, you got to buy the harvest. That's the deal here. Because again, I think the farmers always get stuck holding the bag on this stuff. And it's not fair to take away our profitability to lead to additional profitability from the CPG companies and from the processors.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, unfortunately, we have to transition over. And I think some of those questions might be hinted at answers with this next presentation here. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists here. Thank you so much. So the next couple folks I have to bring up are going to be focusing specifically, I believe, on elderberry. It's probably relevant to a number of our different crops. I'm going to pull up the presentation and you guys can get started. This is available here too. It's on.
That'll be for Terry.
Okay. Yep. Any of those mics are good. So I'll pull it up and feel free to introduce yourself.
Is everybody still awake? It's been a long day, hasn't it? Quite a lot of people here and a lot of great information. So I'm Terry Durham from River Hills Harvest, and we've been growing elderberries since about 1998 and making juice for about 17 years now. And so today I want to talk a little bit about scaling out. This is a process that Chris and I worked on for quite a while to figure out how to bring elderberries out to the whole country and be it advantageous for the farmers. So scaling out, kind of what we mean by that is to, instead of scaling up where you're going to have a big facility that's going to buy product and make it into different stuff in one spot, have that centralized thing. We want to decentralize agriculture. We want us to be more secure, and to make it more secure, we need to spread it out all over the country to let farmers have more control over it in their areas. And so we work with farmers to make pods. I've followed Organic Valley method of organizing where we have pods, and we started to create the pods around the country. And then from there, they would grow elderberry, share equipment and information, and begin to market. And so,
and elderberry and Missouri is one of the biggest pods. I almost consider the state a pod because elderberry is the #1 berry cash crop for that state.
So it's kind of a different idea. Instead of trying to bring everything into bigger manufacturers, bigger systems, we think that using smaller processors with smaller growers and small farms is a much better way to do it, because then we can spread that all out and there's more money for everybody. This is kind of a little representation of what we're talking about. So growers can use a lot of the same kind of processing. Okay, if you got an oil press, you can press lots of different kinds of oil in that press. It can be used by a number of different people. Different growers can use that same processors to make different products. And so when you have a number of different growers around that are utilizing different producers. So we use about 5 different co-packers, and we really believe in supporting co-packers because they can be scaled up enough to take your product and your recipes and make them into food, and then you can get them back from them in a labeled form ready to go. All of our co-processors are also elderberry growers. So by using our farmers as our co-processors, they can specialize in certain areas to be efficient for that production.
And one of the other advantages of being decentralized is we can shorten the lines of communication, distribution of the products. And so the idea being that different regions are going to have different strengths, different local markets or regional markets that might, some areas might want more juice, some might want more powders, some might more dried berries, and so you might have growers more interested in processing one of those others. So by having decentralization of both the processing and the farmers, we can save some costs and just the production.
So have you ever heard of the economic multiplier? We all pass all this money around, and one of the reasons that rural America is not growing, when we're losing farmers, is because we don't keep enough money in rural America. It all seems to go out to the cities where we would sell our raw commodities, and they would add that value to it, and then they would sell it, and they make most of the money, because most of the profit in agriculture comes from that value-added process. We always like to say that elderberry puts the P in perennial, and that means profit, because we know that it's profitable for growers to grow on a small scale, to make it into products, and to be able to serve their community and give them medicine and food.
Technically that's called the velocity of money. Basically, capital is being recirculated. And to Terry's point, I've told the story a few times, but my great-great-grandfather was the first man to plant russet potatoes for J.R. Simplot in Idaho. That became the famous Idaho potato. And of course, no one knows J.H. Patton, my great-grandfather, but J.R. Simplot made a ton and, was a very big figure in the state. Our aim is to keep the control and the benefits in the hands of the farmer and develop rural America.
And so when we do that processing, and we use graphic people in our community, and we use everybody that's local that we create more of this economic multiplier where we're keeping money in our rural communities, which that's really important. So how do you know if your agroforestry product is contributing to the economic sustainability of your community? Economic sustainability is something we don't talk about very much, but we live in a finite world, a finite earth. And so we have to think that we have to be sustainable with our economy, because we can't continue to grow. Sometimes we have to be satisfied with what we have and share with all our neighbors to have a great rural community.
As an old businessman told me when I was younger, the first rule of business is to survive. The second rule is to make a profit.
So I've gone through a lot of different kinds of marketing over the years of 45 years that I've been farming now. And for a while, this is the plan we were working with Elderberry, was this larger distribution plan with KE and UNFI and paying distributors to do work for us. But it doesn't really work. If you look at this graph, you can see how the growers have all the responsibility and they have no control. And we think farmers need to control their distribution and their markets much better than the commodities. And that's what will keep us from being commodities, because we will spread it all over the country with different growers doing different things, but all working together.
Now, a significant problem, reason why this didn't work as well, is because the cost of production was too high versus the imported competition. So the net result on a personal scale is I worked 8 years, sold $1 million, and didn't pay a single dollar of my own bills out of that, because we were looking to build a business and everything was reinvested, and there's so much money that's required up front in following this model.
Because all the power goes to other people. The farmer doesn't have any control in this kind of the larger distribution system, using them, it's what everybody thinks we're going to scale up and we'll get it to all these different people and we can sell it all over the country. Well, that sounds good, but it just didn't work.
Nope.
And so we had to just change.
Pivot is the word.
So this was one of the ways that we started working, was we needed to build a co-op, because that would take the larger growers that really don't want to mess with making products and doing that stuff, that gives them a great place to sell their berries, and they can just concentrate on that, because not everybody wants to be a value-added producer or to direct market or develop different kinds of products to sell out there, ingredients. And so you can see on this system, it's really easy. You just grow your stuff, you join the co-op, they buy your berries, they share in the profits. They do all the work. You hire someone like Chris to market for you and to take care of stuff at the co-op. And the co-op is...
No. What I do is I try to find extra money to hire people like Ariel to get him started, and 3 other people, because I do too many things.
And so this model just... it may work for some people, but this won't work for everybody if you don't have enough volume to really be in the co-op. So our idea was to, when you could grow your berries, you market them what you can, make what you can, but when you have extra berries, they go into the co-op where we can control, the farmers own the co-op, so that we can control that distribution of the things that are made from them.
And like most of agroforestry, most of the members of the co-op, which are coast to coast, even though we're centered in the Midwest, I've got members in California, New Jersey, New York, Florida, and they're small producers and they're selling their own products. And so a lot of them are more successful in selling than they are in growing. It may be a lack of land. It may be a bad year. And so one of the things we do is be sure that they have berries as members, so that they don't lose the development and the market that they have with the products that they're making out of elderberries. So, like, just as an example, during this conference, one of my big problems was solved, almost like you consider divine intervention, because I had been trying for 2 weeks prior to here to get 2 pallets, 3,200 pounds of berries from Iowa to northern New York. And they were both real small places. And my usual sources couldn't find a truck to do that. Well, I got the call today, it's going to happen. So that's the kind of thing we do for the small producers as well. But long term, what we're going to basically do on this is to rely on the marketing and distribution investments of larger companies, who will then add elderberry flavors to what they're doing. And we've already been working on trying to do some blends with, like, elderberry and aroma in particular, black currants and things like that. And we've sent samples to American Hazelnut, for maybe we can get dried elderberries in their trail mix or some of their other products. And so this is really important. And from the standpoint of branding, what we want to do with the co-op is to be the single source to go. Big companies don't want to have to deal with a dozen different farmers in order to get what they want. And so if we can, be the source to sort of setting the standard, they know they're going to get the quality. And one of the other things as far as branding is, like, we're developing powders. And every powder that's developed, we're going to have a nutritional profile for that. And eventually that's going to be a nutritional profile that breaks down by cultivars, because we already know that cultivars are different in their nutritional profiles. And we know that our buyers are going to have certain preferences. And like anything else, as a good salesperson, we want to deal with what the buyer wants and the design. Those ingredients are going to perform for them. And by becoming more efficient through using this form of organization, the plan is that we will be delivering profits to the farmer. And as a co-op, it's an open co-op, so farmers choose how much they want to be involved. But we're not going to be doing so like the Organic Valley kind of approach to things, where you have absolute commitments that's set by the farmer, and the co-op is not selling those kinds of shares until we have contracts in place to be able to pay them. Because my Social Security check does not even cover me. I'm not going to be able to cover those kind of contracts if they don't happen.
So here's the way that we've been working to develop it with the value-added grower control, where, I like to control my product. I like to know where it's going. I like to meet customers and the stores and the places that buy. So you can see on this graph here, the grower raises raw product. He has all this control. He can sell it directly to retailers and get paid by the retailers. He can take it to local processors and have them make it into products. It's much more efficient. There's much more profit in there that goes back to the farmers. And when we use our own farmers as our processors and we invest in them, then they become more efficient, and then it makes the whole system work a lot better.
And basically, this allows for flexibility, because the whole idea of farming and doing this type of thing, it needs to fit who you are. Some people want to make those products and sell them, others do not. And so we want to offer that flexibility. And the basic role of the co-op here is that the farmer is going to make more money, because if the farmer's not making money, there's no reason for a co-op.
The computer is not working.
The computer is frozen. We're in the twilight zone.
So the next slide is where I will talk about the history of how did I come to this conclusion of ways to market for young people. Going down. I don't know what that is.
But the question is, how did I come to Elderberry? And I started out as an archaeologist. I lived in the Middle East with the Palestinians, worked with the Israelis, and my master's degree in archaeology and prehistory of the world. So I was dealing with paleo environments back in the late 60s and 70s. So climate change is not new. It's always been with us. And from working professionally as an archaeologist in all over the Israeli area, which included the Sinai at that time, I went to other things, too long to describe, but I ended up working for Pillsbury for 5 years in the late 90s, providing IT support to the engineering folks there, and then for 2 years and 3 years to international R&D with ingredient and new product development, particularly with Haagen-Dazs International. So I got an insight in how big companies work. Most of my life, probably a total of 20 years or more, I've been teaching adults college at night. Cardinal Stritch was one of my employers, Bethel University, where I was teaching. I was cleared to teach 22 different classes because of 2 MBAs, 2 MAs, and then the MA. So I was teaching business and marketing graduate, undergraduate level, as well as ancient history and international cultures and cultural communication things. So I have a very broad sort of background, so I can sort of understand and serve as sort of a transition or a transmission between the farmer and the industry. And hopefully that's going to lead us to putting together a really big team to work in agroforestry, to serve the farmers and to keep things going. And then my major concern right now is improving our volumes so that we actually can hire people to work in the co-op and to continue the research and development that needs to be done so we can grow agroforestry as a practice. Because when I look out at, I drove here from South Dakota, so that was several hundred miles of corn and soybeans. Okay, that's what I saw all the way. And there's a really big challenge to transition that into a more balanced approach, which doesn't exclude corn and soybeans, but deals with all of the soil and other problems that you are as familiar with as I am.
So after 4 decades of marketing, here are some really important lessons that I've learned. A good idea is not always a good economic decision, a financial decision. Sometimes you can have a really great idea, but it's not going to make you any money. Bigger isn't always feasible or better. It's not always better to get bigger. Sometimes you just need to be more efficient or rethink about what you're doing. Vertical integration is a good thing if you can manage it. We have a vertically integrated business, from nursery, production of elderberries, making products, marketing, and education. And so that's a lot to handle. Not everybody really wants to do all that, but it's a good thing if you can handle it. And working with community always makes life better for everyone. Oops, 2 minutes. So I started out my first farm, my first garden, a market garden, truck patch we had to call it, was 1978. I was working for the University of Missouri, milking 178 Guernsey cows twice a day, going to school part-time. I didn't have enough to do, so I put in 3.5 acres of organic vegetables. I had been learning and studying organic farming. I needed to figure out if it could really work, so I put my first 3.5 acres in, and there's nowhere to sell it except out of the back of your truck. So that's why we call them truck patches. So we had a lot of stuff to organize. There were no farmers markets around back then. That was in the 70s. In the 80s, we started the Small Farm Viability Project. We had this great idea. We were going to build a market for our organic vegetables cooperatively over the Ozarks. The Small Farm Viability Project, the Ozark Organic Growers, and then Forge were the 3 things that we created. We call that the unified approach to organizing. So we had an educational component, which was the Small Farm Viability Project. Then we had a marketing and certification group, the Ozark Organic Growers. And the other thing we had was a bank. We created our own bank through grants and stuff, was called Forge. Because in the 80s, you talk organic to anyone, the banks aren't going to loan you any money. I mean, I was trying to borrow money to put in a raw milk cheese dairy, and they would just laugh at me when I was, so the SMART was great. And what we ended up doing, we set up regional coolers. The farmers would bring their organic produce in, boxed up, drop it off in the regional coolers. We had a big truck that would go around to all the coolers, pick it up. Then they would take it down to Fayetteville, Arkansas, where we had a marketing manager that would sell it, mostly down to Texas. And so here I am, in the middle of Missouri. I'm growing great produce, but I'm having to ship it to Arkansas, and then they ship it to Texas to sell it. It just didn't work for me. We had plenty of people in Missouri that needed to eat that good produce. And that was about the time when we were trying to organize the farmers for the National Organic Program. Some of you can remember that. We were starting to do that. It's still here. So then we started selling at farmers markets, but they weren't very big back then. We had quite a bit of production going. We didn't have enough, so then we worked to start organic farmers markets in Kansas City and in St. Louis, and we still sell there, but you can hardly make a living at farmers markets because you have limited opportunities to sell. And if it rains real hard on a day and you got a truckload of tomatoes, you don't have many places to go with it. So then we were trying to think about how we could do that. We started our CSA about 1990. We ran it for 11 years, and that was great, but it's a lot of work to grow 200 different vegetables. It felt good, and we had great work. It was really nice. We moved the CSA program. It's really popular these days. A lot more people are doing it, but it's a lot of work to do a CSA by yourself. And so it was about 1998, when we started the Elderberry Improvement Program. I've been farming vegetables now for 20 years, and we saw our soil health really going down. We've learned a lot about soil health in the last 20 years, 25 years. And so I could see that it wasn't working. And I always had been wanting to grow perennials from when I first started, but we could never figure out how to grow enough perennials, blackberries and stuff to make a living at it. How were we going to do it? We penciled out lots of things, but it would never work. We came to Elderberry. All of a sudden one day, I saw a gentleman that's selling elderberry juice concentrate. They were bringing it in from Europe. He's getting $14 for these little bottles, and it grows everywhere. Around the Midwest, we have lots of elderberries. So we got interested in that. The University of Missouri got a little grant to try to select new varieties, which is what we've been working with. And so we've been working with the university now for many years to help develop this whole program. So we placed all our vegetables with elderberries. We started developing value-added products, and we started having juice in a bottle to sell about 2007. And once I had juice in a bottle that I could show farmers, then they could see the picture and the potential of this perennial actually being worth something that they could make money on. And so we grew the grower base. Next, we started to teach other growers how to grow elderberries, and we developed Missouri into the center. We produce half the elderberries that are used in the United States that are grown here come from Missouri, and so we're moving that on out to the rest of the country. So that's kind of where we got to. But the biggest thing is that as we have done this, we've developed all these new businesses that utilize elderberries all over the country. So I'm just going to give you some examples, some samples of people that are doing this, that are making a good living, that are growing perennials and are being successful from coast to coast. Tasty Acres is right in the middle of Missouri. They were a strawberry U-pick place to start with. They had about 10,000 people that came out there to pick their strawberries. They had about 5 acres. And then they put in about 3 acres of elderberries, and they were U-picking those. And then they developed it in, and I think this year they actually had their shrub soda fountain. Because, all sodas originally were made with shrubs, and shrubs are easy to make. They're a vinegar preserved fruit juice. They're getting to be more and more popular, but you can mix them with any kind of a shrub with some sparkling water, and you have a really good drink. Elderberry View Winery, some of you may have been there. I know the Agroforestry Academy, I think last year went there. It's in our neighborhood. They make elderberry wine, and it's more likely you call it a destination place, because sometimes that's what you need to do. You get the people to come right to the farm to spend their money. And so they have a nice venue for weddings and for music on their farm. They make wine and elderberry products. They sell it to local farmers markets, and they're doing really well. They've got a profitable business there. North Florida Elderberry Farms is one of our first farms. He got hit by this last hurricane really bad, flattened his whole orchard, but he'll be all right. He'd already picked it. He's making new products. He's working with the University of Georgia to develop some new products. He's starting to make and selling really well down in Florida.
And I sent him a couple pallets of elderberries that he bought from a Missouri farmer.
Yeah, we have to supply these berries out to get them started as they get their stuff growing more and more. Now, the Cockeyed Farms, that's down in Louisiana, one of the first Louisiana elderberry farms. He's got bees, blueberries, and elderberries, and he mixes them all together, makes some great products that he sells all around his community there in Louisiana. Crafty Mayabit, these are retired military people. They are really great farmers. Mayabit they have bees and other stuff. They made $375,000 off their 6 acres last year of perennial fruits and honey. They have great products. They're also harbor host, because people will pay you to come and just stay on your farm, and they don't have to supply them with electricity or water or anything. They just go out to the field, they pull their trailer, they don't charge for it, but they have their on-farm store there, and people will usually spend $50 to $100 minimum when they go into the store. They really like that because they love people, and it gives them a good chance to promote the elderberry, because all these people are promoting elderberry in their community, and that's just bringing up the knowledge and the base for elderberry more and more. Fat Stone Farm is in Lyme, Connecticut, right across from Long Island. They have a maple bush, so they make maple syrup. They also have apples, and so they take their apples, they turn it into apple syrup with the same equipment they use for the maple syrup. Then they take the apple syrup, mix it with their elderberry, and they sell this product. It's called apple shots. It's apple sweetened elderberry juice. It's delicious. And so when they get their pulp, after they squeeze the berries, they take their pulp, put it in a barrel, set it off for vinegar. They make vinegar. They leave it in those barrels for up to 5 years. Makes incredible vinegar. So what do they have left? The seeds. They take the seeds and they have them extruded, and they get the oil from the elderberry seeds and they make soap with it. They use every part of that elderberry. I love that value added chain. When you can make 4 products out of the same thing, you're really adding value. You're really extending that out. The elderberry oil, I think they're the only one I know that makes the seed oil here. In Europe, I've seen the prices at $600 a kilo. They're $6,000 a kilo. Elder Farms are right here. They're doing great down in Springfield. The Buellers have got a beautiful, beautiful farm, an old dairy farm that he has revamped and turned into a beautiful elderberry farm. They make lots of different products. They have the new honey soda that's fantastic, and then they supply ingredients to some other people to make things. East Grove Farms in southeast Iowa, the oldest continually owned family farm in Iowa. Joel was a retired bioremediation specialist. He had worked at Superfund sites to clean them up with using plants and microorganisms to clean up all the messes in the Superfund sites. Well, he retired from that, went back to the farm and started growing elderberries, aronia, black currants, and green gauge plums that have been on the farm there since 1843. His family has been growing the green gauge plums. Then he makes them into different wines and has events right there. He makes really good mead. We started out just doing mead, and then they have beautiful tasting room for their wines and stuff, and it's a venue also. He has music out there. If you get 500 people on your farm and you're making wine and mead, and you control all of everything that's sold, you can sell a lot of your crop at one time. They can drink a lot of mead, they can eat up those stuff. So having a contained thing, a destination type place really does work good for some people. You don't have people around all the time, but when you do, you're really busy and you can sell a lot.
Joel is my next door tenting neighbors on the first elderberry workshop I attended in 2011 with Terry. He holds these fabulous workshops, co-hosted with the University of Missouri every year. Next year is going to be the second international symposium on elderberry in June of 2025, about 12 and 14, I think. And I'll tell you, that'll be something else, because last time in 2013, when we were there, they brought researchers from all over the world. We got to talk to farmers who were growing elderberry in Austria, Hungary, southern Germany. And it was really great to hear about other co-ops and how they worked, and some focused on flowers and some did other things and this and that. So that's something, if you're really interested in elderberry and all aspects of it, a lot of the research, keep in mind, because that will be a really big event, and who knows when the next one will be.
So just remember, you can start small There's different ways to market, remember, but we really like the idea of on-farm processing, growing some stuff, have a big enough processing facility where neighbors can start growing and they can use your equipment, or you can process for them. Because we can start growing lots and lots of new crops for agroforestry, but if we don't have the processing in place for it, it's not going to work. And so we have to have processors growing right along with the growers that are growing.
And sales.
And sales.
Sales.
So keep growing. I guess we could take some questions if you have any questions about that. Thank you.
So I missed the first couple of minutes. I apologize, but the co-op does what function other than coordinate?
Well, right now, basically, we've been getting grants, and we have done a lot of education. You're right. That's been the main thing so far. I mean, one of the things we tried to do is make sure that people go into this with their eyes open, start small, realize the challenges that are there. We've had some additional challenges come along the way, such as SWD, the spotted wing Drosophila, which was not a problem when I first went out there. And so we're sort of coordinating research, and we share that as well. And at this point, we're developing wholesale ingredient products and processing. We have a site identified about 40 miles west of the Twin Cities in Montrose, Minnesota, where we're building an aggregation center. I've got 6 or 7 growers there and about 200 acres that could be growing elderberries. Right now, it's more like 10. And we've gotten some grants to be improving the site on the host farm, and we're working on others. And one of the things we're working on right now is a continuous flow destemmer that we hope will be able to produce 1,000 to 2,000 pounds an hour with 1 to 2 people, which will be a great improvement on the efficiency in the destemming, and that will feed into a wash line and cleaning line, and then into a flash freezer so we can have IQF berries. Because right now we're doing batch destemming, and we're packing in 4-gallon, 25-pound containers or boxes, all food grade. And big processors won't take those at all. And so we need to have the little beans in a tote or a sack so that they can feed into the manufacturing thing. So like I was presented at Practical Farmers of Iowa about, 8 years ago or something. And there was a company there, Choice Harvest, that did IQF berries. And they said, well, if we had IQF elderberries, we could sell them to Amy's and make pies with them. Well, we got a trial set up with them, and then a tornado destroyed the place. So I guess it wasn't the right time, but we haven't given up.
So the processing facility you're working with or building in Minnesota, the co-op is actually building that, or the co-op is coordinating the financing?
The co-op is basically, okay, so every hub is going to develop differently. This is the process. I mean, like we own the destemmer. That way we don't have the patent, and the patent of the designer, the engineer, is not subject to state laws. We're coordinating sales. We operate mostly as a broker right now. And we're coordinating with the other, basically the sales and marketing at this point, as well as sort of doing the administration and helping with the planning, bringing in people like Ariel to help with building this up right. So like also I'm working right now with Tara Johnson and Food Investment Fund. We're developing a scaling up business plan for the co-op. It's getting more details so we'll know exactly what kind of staff, how much working capital, and how to go about that, and to be ready so that we can also at the right time go for a value-added producer grant, which will help us kick off the production in larger scale and be able to bring on more people and trained. And we've been working with the Veterans Farming Initiative. So we've targeted veterans who are disabled but still able to work as a potential labor force for this, and thinking that the seasonal work would appeal to many of them. And so we've got a lot of things like that that are in process. We've had very strong support from the state of Minnesota. I work very closely with Forever Green and the University of Minnesota, Renewing the Countryside, and Sustainable Farming Association, and other things.
And so your revenue sources are grants,
Sales.
sales.
I have online sales. I have not talked about that. You can go to Midwest Elderberry Cooperative. You can buy bulk frozen berries, dried flowers. I've got 400 pounds of dried flowers for sale right now. We did 600 pounds a year. That's one area where I need more people. If I had 1,000 pounds, I could sell them to a tea company that's bigger, because they want 10,000 pounds, but they'll start with 1,000. So there's opportunity out there if we can meet the standards. And the biggest problem right now has been, matching supply and sales. So like 5-6 years ago, I had people, they wanted 50,000 pounds, 100,000 pounds certified organic berries. We didn't have them. So what do? They're going to go someplace else. Now we've got the berries finally, and we have to revive the demand. And that's what we're doing. I'm going to be a supply side west the end of this month with Ariel. It'll be my third time there. We're working with the Rise Nutrition in Wisconsin, who is willing to take those buckets of frozen berries and let them thaw out for a couple days. So, and they'll do those volumes for us and help us develop the market. And we're very happy to be doing that with them. We've done some trials with them already. Sales. The co-op has about $60,000 of sales a year from its online store.
Well, we'll be around if you have any questions. You can ask us. We're set up over there. Come and get some juice, try some different products.
Yeah, I need some juice today.
Every day is a good day for some juice.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.